says yes.
Okay, fantastic. Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Barbara Bynum. I'm the mayor, and this is our new citizen interactive session, and I'll tell you a little more about that in a second. It is Monday, October 14, 2023, 9 a.m. This is a new idea that council came up with so that we could have dialogue with citizens about specific topics that would go beyond what can happen during a regular city council meeting or a work session. And so we've set aside this special time. This is the first one. And today we're excited to welcome Leslie Hallenberg and Claudia Rogers, who are with the Citizens Recycling Advisory Committee. And our goal is to spend this next hour as a group talking about recycling and listening to our citizens about their concerns and their questions, and then being able to engage council members and our staff to present information, listen to information, and hopefully maybe not make specific decisions this morning, but some recommendations, some ideas to move forward on where we go with recycling in our community. And hopefully this goes well, and this is the first of many citizen interactive sessions, which our goal is to hold those before the second work session each month. So every month we have 2 work sessions, and the goal is to do this at 9 a.m. before work sessions on that second meeting of the month, which is usually the 3rd week of the month. Okay. That being said, why don't we start with some introductions? We don't usually do that at council meetings, but we take roll, but instead we'll do introductions this morning. So like I said, my name's Barbara Bynum, and we'll just go around the table.
I'm David Reed, Mayor Pro Tem.
Jim Scheid, Public Works.
Claudia Rogers. Leslie Hallenborg.
I'm Ann Morgan Thaler, Deputy City Manager.
Ed Yulberry, District 2, City Council.
Doug Glassville, District 1, City Council.
Bill Frank, City Council.
Fantastic. And so kicking this off, did we anticipate our citizens starting with their talk, or our staff? Okay, our citizens. Fantastic. Welcome. Good morning.
Great. Well, I thought I'd started off reading our mission statement for Montrose Recycles. It's a citizen advisory committee, if you will, that I've actually been a member of for 25 years when it used to be called the Recycle Task Force. I don't know if any of you have been around that long, but can you hear me okay?
We're recording it, and it always seems to work better for people who want to listen later if we have the microphone just a little closer.
Closer? Okay. I didn't want
We
to be
can hear
yelling.
you. It's the
Right, gotcha. So our mission statement, which Claudia was very instrumental in starting up, the Citizens Advisory Committee for Recycling promotes recycling by educating residents at schools, school events, and for curbside, thereby improving landfill diversion rates and decreasing contamination of materials recycled. The Citizen Advisory Committee utilizes a multifaceted approach of education and advocacy to motivate residents in proper recycling, thereby creating a cleaner community with more efficient recycling results and a better understanding enthusiasm for recycling. And Montrose Recycle's mission is to encourage, recycle, and educate the public on practices to create a clean, sustainable community and environment. Which sounds great, right? I mean, everybody wants that, right? A better environment for our kids, our grandkids. And I have to say, having discussed with Jim, the questionnaire that's gone out, and that option C is to stop recycling, is devastating for us. We are just praying that that option does not come to pass. That shouldn't even be an option. We've come too far, because I recall 25 years ago, before we had recycling, it was a really difficult task getting it started and doing it properly. If you recall, the initial rollout were the little blue and green bins, totes, I think you call them, that you had to separate, and that's really a funny thing to think about the springtime with the wind and an open tote and the paper, and that was a disaster. But this single stream recycling could not be easier. You know what needs to be recycled, hopefully. Everything goes in one bin, gets rolled out every other week. end of story. But it's not the end of story. And there's so many other complicated facets to recycling that people don't even realize, you know. It's all driven by the economy and what is needed at the time. Is plastic something that can be recycled for a price or for a cost? Is it cardboard? Is it paper, aluminum? It's all driven by the markets. And therein lies the problem, you know. That and the fact that we're on the western slope, quite far away from any MRF, which is a materials recovery facility, the closest one being in Denver.
One in Junction, but it is at capacity, so they aren't able to take our materials there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that would be an ideal, if Grand Junction had a MRF, problem solved. Put it on the rails, send it to Junction, then it can go Salt Lake, Denver. But that's not the reality we're dealing with. So I guess on behalf of Claudia and Janet Chapman, who's also a member of our group, and there's several others that I'm sure would have been here if they could, we're just devastating to think that recycling going away is even an option. Of course, you can still recycle at the facility on 6450 Road. How many people are going to put recycling in the back of their car and take it there? Exactly. Probably most people in this room, because that's what we do. We live in the county.
I presume you're not particularly wild about, I believe it's option B, which is where you can opt out.
Don't like that option either. We like option A, because as is shown, Montrose has the cheapest recycling in this area, right? Everyone's aware of that. Hopefully, all of the residents are as well. City of Montrose, $18.30 for a month. That seems pretty reasonable. Yeah. The cheapest place is Durango, but of course, they charge for recycling. Anyway, I think if hopefully the residents, having seen these statistics, will realize we've been getting a heck of a deal for quite a while. So let's just, I have to say, and honestly, I could literally take the whole hour to talk. I have been recycling since I was 13. I'm not going to tell you how many years that was, but it's over 50. And why haven't we come farther in 50-something years with recycling? And having said that, the thought just escaped me. What was, but to think that we could possibly go back and not recycle, it's not always about the money. It's about what's doing the right thing for the environment. Point in case, a lot of you know I have the Snowball business, which for years I got recycled styrofoam. I don't know if there is such a thing, but that's what they were marketing as. And then we go to third grade and teach the third graders, because it was in the curriculum, all about recycling. And I would talk about styrofoam is the devil, it never goes away, it's horrible. And then I thought, what the heck am I doing then? Okay, let me spend 3 cents more a cup and get paper, which, I hate that too, but at least it's a renewable resource. So it's not always about the money, and the bottom line. We got to make the most money possible. Who cares about the environment? We can't keep on that mindset. We've got to think beyond your pocketbook.
May I ask you a question?
Please do.
Thank you. Rather than talking about contracting services, could you comment on glass recycling?
Well, glass is kind of like the evil stepchild, whatever. It's made of sand, which, we aren't really running out of per se, but it takes a lot of energy you can imagine, to take sand and make it into glass. Problem with glass is it's heavy, it breaks, it gets caught up in machinery, people are injured, you breathe in that silica dust. But glass can easily be recycled. In a lot of countries, they do this. They rinse it, they wash it, rinse it, refill it. Central America, Asia, they do this already.
I did that here when I was a kid.
Here? Yeah. Really? Like probably at Coors, right?
I go out along the road and pick up pop bottles.
That's so-
Got 2
yeah.
cents a
Right.
piece for 'em.
Exactly.
And it was a great,
That's when you got money for a pop.
Yeah, but,
and it was an excellent recycle because they brought the finished product out and they took the empty bottles back. So it took no additional energy to route it.
Jim,
Milk-
we know,
Milk was the same way.
yeah, the city of Montrose does not do the glass recycling in our commingled single stream. So therefore, I'm not sure if you can answer the question. Do you know where, for those of us who take glass to the recycling center that isn't the city's facility, do you know what happens to that glass?
Yeah, so at the recycle center north of town, they take all materials there to Grand Junction, including glass. So there it is sorted, and I believe they grind the glass there and they stockpile it until a market is available for glass, which kind of goes up and down, right?
Okay.
I think things have changed with some of the bigger, like Coors was one of their main places for glass using the material, and that fluctuates now. So I think their glass pile grows, and then when there's a market, they ship it off. So it ultimately goes to Grand Junction.
Wasn't some of the glass being used in road to asphalt, stuff like that?
Not that I'm aware of in this area. Maybe Scott can comment on that.
That's a thing, but not in the region. Nobody's made that leap yet.
We do use some of the recycled glass, the finely ground glass, and some paint additives for some of the crosswalks and stuff, some types of
You know, honestly,
reflectors.
I don't know. The only thing I've seen in this area is that there have been some people have used it for landscaping, so it can be.
Yeah, I was going to say
ground,
that in Durango, they were grinding the glass and giving it to people for landscaping. So,
Jim, okay.
I just wanted
yeah.
to mention one other thing that I learned on my tours is they also, the landfill has to be covered every night. And sometimes they will use ground glass to do that.
If it keeps the trash from blowing away, I
And the
suppose that's a
smell and-
reuse.
Right.
You
and
know,
or- yeah.
they're not melting it down and making more glass with it by
Right.
doing that, but perhaps they're keeping trash from blowing.
If we had the bottle bill, which has been tabled indefinitely in 2011 in Colorado, 10 cents deposit, like you're talking about, it was a nickel when I was doing it. But yeah, why wouldn't we? Same thing with plastic bottles, like Oregon, Iowa, many states do that.
I know we still have a problem with, and we were talking to some of our recycled truck drivers, that we still have people, even though we make it very clear that we cannot recycle glass. We don't have the sorting facility, it breaks, it has a potential of injury. We still have people filling their recycle bins
Yes.
with bottles.
We know that.
Yeah. Jim, why don't you
Which
tell us,
contaminates our stream.
Exactly.
Which makes it harder for us to validate the costs
Exactly.
we're being able to charge.
great segue. Jim, why don't you give us the quick nuts and bolts of how the city goes about recycling, what that looks like and what it costs us, or are we making money? And yeah, just the 101 of city recycling.
Yeah, for sure. So we've been talking about, we collect a single stream recycle and material from residents in the city. So that means a single bin that you can throw everything in and that's recyclable. And so that's where some of the misconception occurs when everybody thinks it's recyclable. Glass, for example, is recyclable, but is not allowed in our recycle stream because of the way it's processed. So once we collect it in our trucks, we take it to the recycle center north of town, and Waste Management runs that recycle center. They take all of our materials and they bale it into a big bundle, single stream. So it's all mixed together, and they wrap it into a bale that they can put on a truck and transport to Denver. And that's where, as a contractor, they do not allow glass in that process. So it's not necessarily even a choice of ours, it's that is our option for transporting the material, and that is their requirement. So that's why we don't allow it in our collection. Then ultimately the material is transported to Denver to a large MRF where they sort the materials there. Very state-of-the-art facility, really neat to see. They use all sorts of different automated systems to separate all the materials from each other. Different types of plastic, papers, cardboards, aluminum, everything is sorted. There's a lot of staff that work at the facility, but there's also a lot of really neat automated systems. They sort it and then they stockpile it and wait for a market. So some materials move very quickly, the plastics 1s and 2s. Those are a pretty hot market, and those go quickly. Cardboard is another one that
Could you
goes
explain
quickly.
really quickly kind of what items are in the 1 and 2's plastics, so people understand what we mean when we say that?
Yeah, like a milk jug is a number 1 plastic. So it's that thicker, heavier plastic. A clear plastic, like maybe an orange juice bottle or something that's clear, those are often a number 2. Those are the ones that are most recyclable. So you think of like the thick, heavy plastics like this would be one of those. I think of a milk jug being a good example. Those are those items that are recyclable or have a good market for recycling.
The
Anyway.
disposable water bottles you see that are big package of 100 in the store, those are recyclable but not
Yeah.
part of our recycle
They're-
stream.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe, are those ones? Yeah. So, yeah, certain types, but the
That's
plastic that
peat,
wraps those together is not, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
Great, thank you.
And where, that may be where there's a misunderstanding of what's recyclable and what's not. Oftentimes, the whole plastic bag will go in the recycle bin, or people put them in a plastic bag and put them in recycle bin. That's a common issue we have. So if that were to make it all the way to that MRF facility in Denver, everything would be thrown in the trash. So that's the contamination that we end up getting charged with, because their machines don't have the ability to separate them. So that's why the plastic bags they don't work, because it ends up being trash rather than recycled that way. Same with, I don't know, any sort of material that's used to hold them together. If you put plastic bottles in a paper bag, that sort of thing, it doesn't work. They need to be separated so that when they get there, they can be, use their systems to get them apart. Yeah.
And in
How
terms
much
of
glass?
contamination,
How much glass contamination do we have?
Our overall contamination is about 12%. Of that glass, so glass is heavy. That's why it may not be a large percentage in volume, but it is a significant percentage in weight, and that's how they base everything on weight. I think right now, I believe the last one I saw was about 4% of our overall stream is glass, which is a contamination. So 4% by weight, I would say.
And
so
how
they're
are we,
not ounce, or- good.
how are we paying, can you take us through what this looks like? Is the city, I think there's a misperception that we make money on recycling. So can
Yeah.
you just explain the economics of it from the city's point of
Yeah.
view?
So we pay a tipping fee, which is similar to the landfill, really. It's based on the tonnage we drop in our truck at the facility here in Montrose. So the recycle center, was we unload out of our trucks, we pay a tipping fee at the gate there. And that's a little over $100 a ton. And then the material gets transported to Denver. And then depending on what the market is for each material, if let's say markets are really high, they will actually credit us back a rebate for that material. So minus their processing fee. So the amount that it takes them to sort the material and get it to market, I think that costs about another $100 per ton. If the market's really high and those materials are valuable, we could get money back. Where we end up paying more is like actually right now, the markets are not great. And so that processing of sorting it in Denver is an additional fee to our tipping fee right now. So instead of a rebate, we actually get paid, we actually get another fee. So right now, we're probably closer to $130 total per ton of cost for that recycled material because the markets are low and we pay an additional amount for them to process the material.
And how much is that a year or month? Or can you give us, how many tons are we sending? Like, what does this mean?
Total, we're about 800 tons of material per year.
Okay.
And that's, we watch that because we have quite a large increase in customer count. We've seen substantial growth in the 3 to 5% over those last few years in customer count, but have not seen the same in the tonnage that we've been sending to Denver. We've actually been pretty flat. From the first year we started tracking, which was 2016, was also about 800 tons. So we actually went down in tonnage there for a little bit and are just now, this year and last year, on track to be above 800. So we track that, and I don't really have a good explanation of why it has acted that way. Trash has been a little bit more predictable in that it's been increasing with number of customers, but recycle hasn't been. And it could be what's being recycled, you know, the type of material, because some things are lighter. Everything's done by tonnage, so it's not necessarily a volume that's less, but the weight has been flat. So it could be what's being recycled.
Do you think
Maybe
people
that-
are just not recycling as much as they were?
That could be. I'm really not sure. We've been contemplating that ourselves, and I don't have a great answer of why that hasn't
So
increased.
trash has been going up and recycling's been the same, and you'd think they would,
You would think
if they were
would.
indicating just the population growth, they would
Yeah.
be.
I mean,
Do we have a
just
number?
common sense would tell you that if the trash is going up and the recycling is going down, fewer people are using the recycling process and they're dumping it all in the trash.
So do we have a number of people that have recycling bins versus the number of recycling bins that are picked up every 2 weeks? What I'm looking for is the citizen participation. I mean, if we have 1,000 people have a recycling bin and only 50 people are using it, I think that would be a good indicator.
Yeah. We don't track necessarily how many we pick up on a weekly, you know, we're not tracking that there were 1,000 cans we drove by and we only picked up 500. We do track how many cans we actually pick up. So I don't have that, what you're saying as far as, did somebody not put their can out this week? We don't track that.
Well, with only, like, my home with only 2 of us living there, we don't fill that can up every 2
Right.
weeks, so.
That's probably more common. We do see that a lot of cans are not full, that they'll be out on the curb, but there's only a small amount in them.
I don't even bother to put mine out if I don't have anything
Yeah.
worthwhile.
And then we have the
Mine's
alternative
busy,
where
we don't have-
they're full every 2 weeks, or we have, I would say, many that are full every 2 weeks. So there's just different, you know,
Sure.
family operations. So some people are filling their can regularly and others just aren't. They only have a few items in there.
You know, I've been getting a few calls with people, from people about this, and their concern is that with gas prices going up, grocery prices going up, city water going up, other city services going up, the possibility of people being charged for the drainage system that we're looking at. Now suddenly they're saying, well, the recycle going up, and there's a lot of people that live in the city of Montrose that weren't fortunate enough to work in jobs that were higher paying, that they receive $1,000 or $2,000 a month from Social Security. They're making $600-700 a month, Social Security, and some of them are living on that. Fortunately, the few calls that I've received have said, well, we own our own home. We've owned it for years and stuff. And that brings up another point. If some of these barrels are only being half filled right now, what happens if we raise the rate and people say, well, I don't want the recycle bin, and they take that out, and their services might go down for recycling because they're not paying that recycling, but that might increase our trash because, like I said, some people that don't have them now are probably throwing their recycles in a trash bin. And I guess that's my concern, because these people have called me and said, hey, what do you think? I'm going, well, I'm listening to you.
I think now we're going to turn it back over. Yeah.
Let me jump in here. One of the things that, well, first of all, I have no credentials in solid waste, but I started and ran a recycle center in a rural part of Texas for 10 years. And it's still going strong, even though I'm not there anymore.
Put your mic on.
But it was, ours was a drop-off center, which is entirely different than single stream. Single stream is a recipe for contamination, no matter what. I mean, no matter how good a job we do educating people, there's still going to be contamination. So keeping that contamination to a minimum is the goal, right? And if we're below 10%, we're not dinged on it. Is that right? Okay. Well, one thing that we learned Leslie and I learned, is that there are 8,000 trash customers, and there are only 2,700 recycle customers. 2,700 bins out versus 8,000 with trash. That is very likely the reason that the recycle has stayed stable and trash has gone up, because you may not have a lot more bins out than you had 5 years ago for recycling. So I can see as our city grows, more and more trash is being generated, more and more trash bins are out there, and more trash is going to the landfill. And it is all about money. I mean, Leslie and I have a thing about that. I don't know how much the city is willing to or able to subsidize recycling, but single-stream recycling is always subsidized. My little place, the first year, we sent 50 tons. There was a population of 350 people in my town in Texas, so we drew from a bigger area. We probably had 2,000 customers. And everything that we did was based on the value of the commodity. And each of these recyclables is called a commodity. And we balanced our shipments based on the value of commodities at the time. We don't have that pleasure here. Because we're doing single stream, and single stream is the only thing that makes sense for residents of the community, they're not going to go back to a drop-off site, no matter how dedicated they are. Some stuff is going to wind up in the trash. So what we need to do is figure out how to increase the value of what we're putting in our recycling and decrease the amount of contamination, of course. Increasing the value, there are commodities that have well, our prices here, and this was the April report, our price per ton that Waste Management, and the contract I had was with Waste Management out of San Antonio, so I'm familiar with Waste Management. The price per ton varies from $5 a ton for mixed paper to $1,500 a ton for UBC, which are aluminum beverage cans. Huge difference. If we were able to increase the collection that we have of those commodities that are the highest value and maybe decrease that percentage. Right now, we are sending, as of April, we are sending almost 40% of what we send is at the $5 rate. There's no way that we're ever going to have the ability to lower our cost if that rate sticks at 40%. And I think it has been pretty much mixed paper, and mixed paper are cereal boxes, junk mail, catalogs, newspapers.
You're saying that's
phone
the
books.
best stuff to recycle?
No, it
No,
is
it's the
not.
worst stuff
It
to
is the
recycle.
worst.
Okay, sorry.
It is the least
Okay.
value.
I got
it's
that
the
flipped
best-
around and was confused.
It's the best stuff to recycle because it moves quickly. The mills take it. But there is so much of it nationwide that the mills are not paying anything for it. And even 10 years ago or 15 years ago when I started, we were cheering when we could get $10 a ton for mixed paper. So, and if things were separated, newsprint has more value than, than junk mail. But we don't separate. So we have to look at the combined values. If we, the HDPE, which are the number 2 plastics, milk jugs, shampoo bottles, Clorox bottles, all that are number 2s. That's $308 a ton. Not great, but a whole lot better than $5. So my suggestion is that we, first of all, that the city determine what level of subsidy what percentage of the subsidy can be provided by the city for recycling. And we make some plans to be able to achieve, over a period of time, be able to achieve that lower subsidy that the city is doing by increasing the value of what we put in recycling bins, increasing the amount of recycling that happens in Montrose. One of my suggestions is that I believe that this is true, that the city does not require businesses to recycle cardboard. Cardboard has way more value than mixed paper. And the more cardboard we send and we can offset that percentage of mixed paper, the better our loads would be. If the city were to determine that businesses should be encouraged or even obligated to recycle only cardboard, that would be a plus for us. What would be a real plus is if that cardboard could be baled separately from our single stream, then we could send it direct mill, which I was turning over 20 tons of cardboard directly to the mill for like $1,200. And at that time, Waste Management handled the transportation, and we were not charged a transportation fee for that. It was absorbed, of course, in the amount. But cardboard has a lot of value, but it mostly is when you get it to the mill. And if you can do single stream. I don't know if that's possible here. The horizontal baler that is at the Waste Management site is incredible. And it could probably bale bales of cardboard close to 2,000 pounds each, maybe 1,500, 1,800 pounds each with a horizontal baler. If we were able to do that, we could send that off separately and increase the revenue. The other thing that we can do is to look at what is actually going in the trash. And I conducted this large trash audit at one of the largest parks in Texas. There were 4,000 guests a day. And we did a trash audit of 10%. And we determined that the amount of recyclables going into the trash was 2 or 3 times the amount of recyclables that they were collecting through their aluminum and plastic bottle collection. So, that's something else we could do is assess how much is actually going into our trash that's going to the landfill. And right now, we're not looking at that at all, right? It goes in the truck and goes to the landfill.
Yeah, we don't, there was a landfill audit done, 5 years ago, probably. I don't have the results of that right here, but I know there was one done recently on Montrose County landfill and Mesa County landfill, as far as in the region. So that information is there, maybe just a few years old at this point.
Telluride just recently finished a trash audit. I guess it's just what it sounds like. You take a bunch of trash and you divide it up and you look at it.
In the small community you were in, did you actually pick it up at each house, or was it a drop-off site?
No, it was totally different than what we have here, except that we were also balancing value. And because we were in an unincorporated part of the county, we didn't have a city to subsidize us. The county gave us land, and we got grants for buildings and balers, and the county gave us a forklift. But totally different.
So what is our cost per can, just to purchase the cans?
I don't know. I don't have that number on top of my head. We order them by the truckload. That's why I'm trying to do the math real quick. It's $45,000 for a truckload.
Our finance person wants to.
I think they're about $67 a piece.
Okay, that sounds right.
That was 67 if you didn't hear.
Yeah.
The other question is, the problem I see isn't just collection, it's also the education, not only of our users, but also the purveyors. A national pizza chain, who I shall not name, prints on their box, recycle this box. But you can't, because every one of these boxes is a contaminant.
Yep.
And how do we educate on a more broad scale the people that are providing these materials to the end user? This is a bigger question, I know.
Yeah, I mean, hang on. I want to circle back to what you were saying, and I'm seeing if perhaps the takeaway is what you intended or not. If we in the city of Montrose focused on just a few of the most cost-effective things to recycle, would that allow us to perhaps really focus in on things that are going to be cost-effective and help with the education component, which is right now, there's this whole list, and if instead we said, just put cardboard, I'm going to exaggerate a little, cardboard and aluminum cans. If we said, that's all we want, would that help the current situation? Was that possibly what you were getting at, or?
Well, we have done some of that. So we recently, we've identified the same thing, that the, ones and twos in plastics are really what we should be focusing on. Now, we can accept other items, but their value is so low, and that ultimately they may not, or they may be a very long time before they're recycled. They're stockpiled in Denver, but ones and twos are truly recyclable, and the value's high. So we've even been doing some social media educational pieces about, here's what a number one looks like, here's what a number two looks like, these are the ones that we would like to see in the stream. So we've been doing that. Haven't really necessarily noticed an effect on our percentage that we actually see in the stream. And we only do an audit at Waste Management once every 6 months. So it's a very slow change that we would see in the percentages on this, because it takes so long before we do an audit. So we have done some education on ones and twos, trying to really put more, I don't know, just information out there, what they look like, and these are what should be in the stream.
Have we done that in the city beat that goes out to every utility customer?
I don't know if it was in the city beat
I know
or
I've
not.
seen it on social
but-
media, I've seen
Yeah.
it on a press release.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing it in the city beat, which I know goes to every customer that utilizes city services and city trash and recycling.
Here is one issue with that. If you live in an HOA, you don't get that bill. You know what I mean? You don't get a water, sewer, trash bill if you live in an HOA.
I live in HOA, I get a
Not
water, sewer, trash
necessarily
bill.
true.
Really? Because I know my mom lived in one, and she never, granted, she's almost 100, but we never saw any kind of,
That's true for some developments
Yeah.
like condo complexes or
Condos,
something.
that's what I'm-
But a regular
Yeah.
subdivision,
Yeah.
everybody pays their
Everybody
own.
gets their own bill.
But that, we're kind of touching on it, but I'm just wondering, should we be looking at doing, and I know we do some here and there, but should we be looking at a mass educational program to teach people the value of recycling and what it means to us as a society?
we have grappled with that for years.
Haven't we been trying that for years?
The most difficult part of that is that there are so many rules, and there's so much that, if you just take plastic, you have to be able to see the number on the bottom. You have to know what that number means. You have to realize that when you're purchasing things, you may be purchasing something that has to go to the landfill, but you see a plastic bottle, and so it goes in and it contaminates the load. There are so many variables in what we're taking that that's very confusing to people. Having some incentive for people to recycle properly could be very helpful. And that would mean we would have to do audits of their recycling before and after the education, and maybe cut them, $1 a month on their recycle charges, or, something like that where there's some incentive for individuals to recycle properly. And these new stickers that are not on all the cans in Montrose, or the county or anywhere else, if these stickers that y'all designed could go on all the cans, and we could educate HOAs, we could educate the individual citizens, and they would look at this every time they look. It's pretty confusing, but because it's got the pictures, it's much more clear to people. We're working with Abel who works with Jim, to get these in Spanish as well, so that we are not creating a situation where we've whitened up the whole recycling industry. We want everybody to be able to understand recycling and to know what the value of recycling is. But there's so much information that it mostly muddies the water. People that are into recycling, oh man, I could talk to you for 3 hours.
But it is overwhelming.
It
And
is
then
over-
to add the
and
confusing.
it doesn't make sense to people.
Sure, it doesn't make sense. And then to add that I think things have changed. You know, I've been recycling for a long time and recently became more aware of, and this we haven't talked about, we've talked a lot about the city and taking it to Denver or Junction, but where does it ultimately end up? And, you know, for a while there, it was being bought, it was in China, then they said no, so then we're shipping it to other countries, then they said no, and, you know, even though we're saying we're recycling this stuff, I start to worry it's ending up unfortunately, in undeveloped countries, and we're just making, we feel good because we recycled, and we're making it their problem.
But you know what? I have to say, I'm glad China doesn't take our stuff. And I've been to China, and they have enough of their own. They don't
Sure.
need ours. And then, you know what happened? They cherry-picked the ones and twos. The rest of it ended up in the ocean because they don't necessarily have, you know, the facilities or the infrastructure to get rid of this. I mean, you've seen
So
that.
where does it go now, and do they have the
Well, they haven't
infrastructure?
caught
Because
up
I'm
on it.
afraid the answer is
doesn't-
no. I feel good because I recycle,
No.
and it's ending up in some undeveloped country on the side of their road or in their
Or
water.
stockpiled somewhere in this country.
Recyclables are not being exported at this point in time because countries don't want our crap.
They have
And
enough.
we are notoriously bad at having clean recycling. The Americans are not, we are not up to speed as Europeans are and Canadians, and even in Mexico, they do a much better job of abiding to the rules of
Rinsing
recycling.
bottles and-
So, yeah, and so what we're looking at is a situation where it's all staying in the US now, and we're having to deal with it. There weren't enough MRFs, the materials recycling facilities. There weren't enough end product users. Now that's starting to change in the United States. Coca-Cola, for one, they have some corporate goals that, I don't know, X% of their materials will be from recycled material. And that corporate goal is going up every quarter or every year or something. So the demand for recyclables is increasing slightly. The capability of processing recyclables is very slow in that growth. We're seeing cities are doing a pretty good job collecting recyclables, but we don't have the mills in the US because we were shipping all this stuff to China. And so as that develops, I think we're going to see in the next 5 to maybe 10 years that there will be a much healthier recycling environment in the United States because nobody wants our stuff because our stuff is contaminated. And Leslie's right. When we were sending stuff to China, oh my gosh, probably 40% of what we sent was not recyclable. We were paying for the weight. They were having to process it in their facilities, and that's one of the reasons our MRFs are few and far between here because the amount of contamination is there's no money to be made on contaminants. That you transport it and you separate it out, and guess where it goes? The landfill. And our landfills are filling up in the United States. So there's a lot of motivation to improve our recycling, to be able to encourage people to recycle, especially the high dollar, high value items, which are the number 1, number 2 plastics, cardboard, aluminum, even steel, and to encourage industry to use those materials instead of their raw materials, instead of, mining alloys for.
What kind of investment are you looking at for a MRF?
There are all kinds of levels of MRFs. There are MRFs that only, that take a very limited amount of stuff. MRFs that only take plastic, cardboard, and sometimes glass. But what would be in our best advantage here would be able to separate out those valuable commodities and be able to send those directly to a mill. That is our, that's where the money is. That's where we can make the most money and where we can have less expense. It still has to be transported, but to get it to go directly to a mill. And cardboard would be an easy thing because there's so bloody much of it.
Well, like she's saying, if the business, have you ever gone down the alleys, some of these businesses, how much cardboard is in the rubbish bin?
Take a look at the
Yeah.
hospital.
Yeah.
I have a question. Can we kind of regress back to your little flyer there? Is there, I mean, we send these out, but is there a possibility of perhaps making something like that in a sticky back that could be placed?
That's what that is.
That's
But
what
that
that
could
is.
be placed specifically
bin.
on the bin?
That's what that
maybe?
is.
Because it's hard to see, but these are
Yeah.
stickers.
Oh, okay.
It goes on the
The
bin.
question I would have
Right.
is, do we
Let
have
me
staff
see,
out
'cause I
going
don't
out and putting
remember.
those on our bins?
No, and when we have done, we did an audit,
About a month ago.
kind of an audit. And what is that area called?
It was behind Blue Corn.
Blue, yeah, the
That
mobile
neighborhood.
home park in that area. None of the bins had this, not a single one. And again, once this gets done in Spanish as well as English, it will be far more valuable because every time people lift the lid on their bin, they're going to look at this on the top of the bin. And
It might be
But
too
we-
late at that point. I have
Yeah.
I have it on the can in my kitchen, so
we
it doesn't
we
even
need
get
to
it past there.
We need to get this out and get it on every single bin.
Because to me, that sounds like our best investment in time and energy at this point is to educate our public on what recyclables have the most value and are easiest. And that sticker, I think, is a great sticker, but it's only valuable if people can see it.
Yeah.
How
And
does-
this goes out through our recycle guide, so this is sent out through, again, social media monthly, through our recycle guide, and then we do tag cans when we notice them contaminated. So there is a sticker applied saying, your can had this item in it, and it's checked and says, this is not allowed. Please see the city's website or this attached flyer for information on what is recyclable. So we do get that out, yeah.
And I
through
learned
this.
from having lunch with the guys that if they know who is frequently bad at recycling, and they will stop picking it up because it's hurting everybody when people recycle incorrectly.
Yeah, some of them are blatantly not trying to recycle. It may be full of grass and things that are obviously not recyclable, and so those are the ones that we won't collect them. Or if we do, it's through trash, and then we'll actually remove their bin because it's not that they made a mistake and accidentally put an item in that they thought
No,
was
these are people
recyclable.
who are just.
There are some that,
Notorious.
Right, I didn't mean to
really
imply that
contamination.
someone who was trying was going to get in trouble.
Mayor Bynum, I'd like to just, and council, let you know, I think it's about our 5-minute mark in order to get
Yes.
people shifted in for the work session. And so I'm going to be interrupting in 5 minutes in order to wrap it up. And so now would be a great time, while you're with members of our community, if you have any final questions for them to help you understand this topic more from their perspective. And Claudia and Leslie, you've shared some good recommendations. If you have
we're
any,
not done.
if you have any final, then this is the last 5 minutes to do
Like I
that.
said, they could talk for hours.
Can we
on
come
this.
back next time?
The one thing I would say is that the thing we notice in the city, especially about getting information out, you can put press releases out, well, to basically encapsulate it, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him read the flyer.
So, do you guys have any final thoughts for us? Are you hopeful about the legislation that is going to pass the costs onto the producers and reimburse cities for the cost of recycling? Because I wonder, you're not optimistic.
That's been in the works for 20 years.
Well, the legislation that just passed last year, though, I mean,
The implementation, there was no money tied to that legislation. So there's no movement forward because nobody wants to pay extra.
maybe we're talking about something different, because the one I'm talking about specifically passes the cost on to the producers and is in the working committee and has
yeah.
deadlines
Yeah.
of this year and next year in order to,
Televisions and some other electronics have been in that stream for a long time. where it's, where it's passed on to them. But there's still a large percentage of material that goes to the landfill that could be sent back to the manufacturer. But if the manufacturer doesn't have an easy way for people to do that, like boxes all over town, you put your TV in or your batteries or whatever, people aren't going to do it. They're not going to seek it out as an option. So it's real safe for those companies to say, yeah, we'll cover the cost of that, because they know that they're going to get a very, very small percentage of return on that. One thing I'd like to say is, I think changing our recycling program would be insane at this point. We have done education, we've done everything we can do to educate people about what's recyclable, and we haven't succeeded. But we don't want to confuse people more by stopping. We've said it's so important to do this. So to stop is not a good idea. I recommend that we do some neighborhood audit, and I don't know if we can work that out or not, but instead of trying to inform people individually, if we could inform neighborhoods and get some conversation in the neighborhood in English and in Spanish, that would be, and there might even be, like I said, a buck incentive or some kind of a carrot that we're holding out instead of a stick, which is, the stick is we don't pick your shit up. Sorry.
They'll bleep that out.
Sorry.
Jim does. Jim has it.
Yeah. There are lots of ways we can do this, but if we could do an audit of trash and recycling in communities, we could determine how much recyclable is going in the trash, how much non-recyclable is going in the recycling, and we could do some real serious education at HOAs and in neighborhoods. But it's a lot of groundwork to do that. I don't think it would be a huge expense to the city, but could be wrong. But we have volunteers who are, that's what we do. We go out and we peer in people's recycle. And then we take stuff out and we put it in their trash. And sometimes we leave them a note saying, yeah, you can't recycle that. We always try to encourage people. Mostly we just make them mad. That's been our experience. Going through people's personal trash and their recyclables, it's very invasive. And I wouldn't actually like somebody to see how much wine I drink or stuff like that. So the more we can do to do globs, the more we can put community recyclables and trash together and do an audit, the safer it is for the people in that community, and the more likely there will be some peer pressure when we come back with the results. So
I think that's a positive note on which to wrap it up, that we should, your recommendation would be to keep the course, don't make changes, double down on information, education efforts, and perhaps those education efforts should focus on recycling the highest value commodities. Is that a summary of where we are?
good job.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Getting those stickers on every single one of our
And
recycling
yeah, we
cans.
need to get them out.
So thank you so much for coming. Thanks for being part of our first,
You can keep it.
and put it on your trash.
Put it on my recycling bin when I get home.
Thank you guys so much. We do have your contact information. This is not the last we'll be talking with you. The city will be talking about recycling, but what a great way to kick off some discussion about it.
And when will this questionnaire be made public or whatever, the
It
results?
is.
The results,
It'll close August 25th, and so in the coming weeks after that was when we will kind of analyze those results. So
Okay.
towards the end of the month.
Thank you. And we're not just taking a community vote. We're not doing whatever. They're going to
It's just
inform us.
ideas.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you
Yep.
very much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having us.
If you get me a bunch of these, I'll go on my neighborhood the next recycle day
Jim, you hear
and
that?
put them on the cans, because I haven't